we're going to start today with two renowned speakers from around the world. We have today in our first session, as we know, we broke this up into some different categories today. And we're starting today intentionally with coaching in challenging times. Because with forget the last couple of years around the world globally, there are challenges on individual levels, our group dynamic levels, our large scale system levels, you name it. Every country, every culture, every university, every individual is experiencing something. So we're going to start today by exploring what is the new normal, and then how to integrate that mutual learning into the coach practice and into education. With my clear pleasure, I'd like to introduce your two speakers today. Dr. Qing Wang is an educational psychologist. She's a chartered psychologist, an accredited coaching psychologist, and a passionate lifelong learner. She completed her PhD from the University of Bristol and currently works as an associate professor in educational coaching psychology at the School of Psychology and Cognitive Science. She's part of the East China Normal University, and she established herself the Educational Coaching Research Group at ECNU. At ECNU, they focus on coaching psychology research and practice in the field of education, and she'll be sharing a lot of nuggets today from her experience in both building it and implementing it. She's also going to be drawing upon her genuine interest in coaching psychology for learning. She explores, she designs, she delivers, she evaluates all the different coaching models and approaches with teachers, with students in secondary schools, medical schools, vocational schools, universities, parental education, and uses all the ideas from CBT, solution focus, positive psychology, mindfulness, motivational interviewing, and narratives, all to provide a very comprehensive service that encompasses both professional and personal issues. She is going to be engaging in a very conversation style, informative session with Dr. Michelle Bennett. Michelle is currently the CEO of Bennett Consulting LLC. Prior to that, she served as the Director of Cancer for Research Strategy at the National Cancer Institute with a personal connection to change that was really important on people's lives. She earned her PhD in oncology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And on top of that, found time to become a certified executive coach. So she has integrated mutual learning into her coaching, her consulting, her training practices as she works with individuals, she works with a team, she works with organizations, that important multi-level piece that really influences where change sticks. She also has extensive practical experience in promoting collaboration, which I saw firsthand in our planning conversations. And with that, she takes a team-based approach by bringing together research scientists with very diverse backgrounds and expertise across many dimensions of difference, all with the goal of focusing on solving complex scientific problems and increasing their effectiveness. You can begin to see how the combination of these two are very connected to our goal of this conference around disrupting and learning. Michelle's co-authoring the collaboration and team science, the field guide, and some of her resources for both of our speakers today will be available to you in the resource room. Lisette and I will share with you at the end of today. On that note, I'm going to stop talking and share it back over to you, to Qing and Michelle, to take it from here. For everyone else, for the next 30 minutes as you're listening to them, sit back, enjoy, take notes. Add your comments and ideas into the chat. And with me, start thinking about one idea, a question, the other 10 ideas and thought-provoke that come out of this conversation. And we'll come back together afterwards. Valued colleagues, it's all yours.
Hello.
Hello, Qing. How are you today?
Hi, Michelle. How are
Hi.
you? I'm fine.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. It's rather late for me, though. Oh, thank you for your introduction, Erica. Right, no. So, Michelle, I know some about your background, and could you please tell me like 3 exciting things about your work?
Yeah, thanks, Qing. And I do realize it's late for you. What, 11 p.m. I think your time, if I'm correct. So as you heard, I'm a biomedical scientist by training. And I actually just thought it'd be interesting to share that I came to coaching by actually being asked to work with scientists who are being thrown into transition. I was in a position in that where it involved people who were scientists working in research laboratories, and they were reviewed on a quadrennial basis. And every once in a while, scientists wouldn't meet expectations, and a decision would be made to close their laboratories. And I started to become the person that they tapped on the shoulder and said, "Oh, Michelle, why don't you go work with these people, as we've just thrown them into transition in their lives? Let them, they'll have to close their labs and they'll have to find something else to do." And I just really didn't feel equipped to be able to do this well. And that's what led me to executive coaching. And that in turn really led me to become passionate about working with scientists and helping to, help to guide scientists in understanding how they could really be working together better. I think through coaching, I was able to understand how they could combine the science with the group dynamics to do more than they could do on their own. And I think if there's one more thing you should know about me, I've become really passionate about mutual learning over the last about 4 years. And when I say mutual learning, what I really mean is really understanding that our behavior drives from our mindset. And it's really our mindset that influences what we do, what we say, how we do it, and then the results that we get. So that was a lot.
And feelings too. The people's emotions interact and we influence each other.
Yes, absolutely. So
Right.
Qing, tell me a little bit more about you.
Well, my main playground of coaching psychology is in the field of education. I use psychologically based coaching approaches to facilitate students' development of positive learning dispositions and well-being. And in the last few years, I found the most exciting thing about my work is that I can work with a variety of participants, teachers, students, parents, and other people who are involved in different research projects. Like I work with schools in K-12, colleges and universities, vocational schools, and international schools in China. And I'm able to see these kind of ecological systems of different levels of educational institutions and gradually get an overview of how educational coaching could facilitate people to learn, as well as how to learn in general. And also I need to consider students' developmental characteristics and specific needs in different contexts. So that leads to the second thing that I've really enjoyed in my work is that I work with people using participatory action research a lot, which is different from the quantitative experimental design of the mainstream psychological science. So participants, they are co-researchers in my team, and in our team, investigators are co-learners. So we engage in the mutual learning, which is mutual knowing, listening, understanding, learning, and growing along the journey. So the third exciting thing is related to this, actually. So we can see these changes of participants, and changes can sustain to some extent after we have finished the research projects. It seems that research and practice always has this kind of gap that educational studies receive critiques that the effort won't last. And coaching received critiques that they're not so theoretically driven. But I begin to see that the more and more studies trying to close the gap, including my own efforts to translate what known from educational and psychological theories into coaching practice with teachers and students, and to involve them in education issues that they really care, not just from researchers' perspective. And meanwhile, we're trying to put the best coaching practice under the scientific lens and prove their effectiveness, actively using a researcher's perspective. And I think that's excellent mutual learning. I think this integration is very interesting, rewarding.
Yeah, that sounds really exciting, especially because it sounds like you're building this bridge. You're building this bridge from the research to practice, which I think sounds really powerful.
Trying to. Thank you. So yeah. So you're an expert on team science and team coaching. We both have an interest in teams.
Yeah.
But what's the key difference between team coaching and group coaching, and how do you approach your work with teams?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So how do I think of a team versus a group? So when I think about a team, Qing, I really think about a group of people who have come together, especially in the sciences, to solve a really complex scientific challenge. Developing vaccines for COVID during the pandemic is a great example, right?
Yeah.
It's work that no one person can do on their own anymore. And I think as a society, as a world, there are fewer and fewer really complex problems that people can solve, researchers can solve alone in their laboratories. Yeah. And so when I think about teams, there are different disciplines have come together. People with different perspectives have come together, many dimensions of difference, which is absolutely essential for innovation today, because you don't know what you don't know until you have people together kind of exploring that space between two knowns, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I see them as being interdependent. You can't get the job done without people interacting. So that's how I think about teams. I think about groups as, number of individuals, multiple individuals who come together, maybe to achieve some sort of a goal. And at the same time, they are not interdependent with each other to get that work done. So that's where the difference in my head lies. And so you might ask me, what's the impact of that as I work with teams, as I think about collaboration? And so the way that I like to talk about it is that for me, it creates these two big spaces. These teams are focused on a task, right? There's a particular project that they have. There's something that they really want to get done, solve a problem, which is so important. You may know this about scientists, biomedical scientists, but they're not really trained in the finer points of group dynamics, right? And so what can oftentimes happen is that they will form teams, but they don't understand necessarily how important building trust is, or setting expectations, or how to really effectively manage conflict. They can manage conflict on the science side because they're trained to do that, but personal conflict can really end up being a challenge. So that's what I bring to the coaching. That's what I bring to the interacting with teams, is helping them see and understand how important it is to have and develop and tend to a strong group dynamic, or I'll call it a team dynamic. Does that make sense? Is that clear what I said?
Yes. It sounds very, very important for your coaching work to bring in this trust and mutual learning and recognition of each member of the team to reach their shared goals.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, right. So, well, actually, based on your definition of team coaching and group-based coaching, I found that there's a mixture of team and group coaching in my own research.
Tell me more.
So if you don't mind, I'll share more about it. So the participatory action research I mentioned with teachers and students, they are team-based. So system theory and team science, group dynamic definitely play important role in these projects, with an emphasis on this mutual influences and interactions, interdependence, as you just mentioned. So the team dynamic was recognized, utilized, and even shaped in this study. So for example, we conducted a study with medical students and their tutors in problem-based learning, and we established a coaching integrated model with the existing pedagogical method. So the aim and goals of medical problem-based learning for them were agreed and consistent. So we moved towards the same direction with the additional power of coaching in the study. And some of my educational coaching research is done with group of students, and it's more like group-based coaching. They gathered and join in our coaching intervention programs, and they have their own learning aims and goals. So for example, we designed, implemented, and evaluated an educational coaching model called Mindful Agency Coaching, MAC. with a group of university students using various research methodologies like narrative, psychometrics, and randomized control trials. So we took the form of group-based coaching rather than team coaching. So these students, they were asked to set their own learning goals, they be aware of and reflect on their own learning issues and strengths to develop their learning dispositions. And so in this group coaching, students had interactions and conversations in paired or group work, but there's not so much about group dynamic and shared goals or interdependence that you mentioned as a team as a whole. So people sometimes work as a team and sometimes work as a group. So I think both team and group coaching that are important and useful depending on the aim and the research purpose and questions, particularly for researchers like me.
Yeah. And I really, really love what you just said, Qing, because I think that that's what your last phrase was like a key distinction, is that you want them to know if they're a team, right? And if you want them to know if they're a group, and then you want to make sure you're coaching to or facilitating with or working with them in the ways that are appropriate, and the expectations are clear about how things are delivered. So yeah, very powerful.
Yeah. So our topic is about disruptions and learning and challenges. So Michelle, what challenges did the pandemic pose for you, and how has it changed the way that you think about engaging in your work?
Oh my gosh. I was just thinking about this morning. Yeah, I know. I was just thinking, I don't know, well, maybe I know why, but like March 16th is like 2020 is like so vivid in my head, right? It's like, it's just like everybody's going home. You're going to start working from home now. And we're all like, what? Like, seriously? And then you think it's going to be 2 weeks, right? And then it's like a month, it's 3 months, it's now it's been 3 years. Like, how did this happen? So I think, so this is what happened to me, is like, first, you think it's only going to be a couple of weeks, and then it starts sinking in that all of these meetings that I have set up, all of these arrangements that I have to meet with teams, to meet with groups in order to facilitate meetings or help them learn to work better as a team. All of these conversations set up with people where I was planning to work with them in having some really, really difficult conversations. And I remember people saying to me, Michelle, you can't do it. It'll never work. You can't do it virtually. You have to do all of this work in person. I'm like, well, I don't have a choice anymore. I've got to figure out how to make this work virtually. And so at the time that I was faced with this, I was also in training to become an instructor with Roger Schwartz and Associates. And this is where I learned about the mindset mutual learning. And I was very steeped in this approach to not only in my own life, but also in trying to figure out how do I integrate it into my practice? How do I integrate it into what I do professionally? And then I was like, you know what, this is the time to figure out how to integrate it. And I would have to say that it's probably one of the most magical things I saw happen for me in my relationships with individuals, teams, and leaders and organizations during the pandemic. But by leaning into this mutual learning, my own mindset, and when I say mutual learning mindset, I mean one that's very, very open, open to differences, open to understanding that, that you bring diverse teams together for a reason. But when I really started to live into that and incorporate it into how I worked with others and how I facilitated and how we entered into those really difficult conversations, it started working. And like I said, it sort of felt kind of magical, but had I not been faced with the pandemic, had I not been, I'll just say, forced to have to try to operate in this way, I don't think I ever would have figured that out. So it's, all through the pandemic, I kept saying we need to look for the silver linings, right? Where are the silver linings? Where are the silver linings? And I would say that the incorporation of mutual learning into my work was one of the biggest silver linings that I discovered. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. It's really, really powerful. Yeah. The
Yeah.
COVID-19 pandemic changed a lot. Yes, in coaching research, it's changed a lot as well. But I think that some fundamental psychological needs of human being remain, like
Yes.
what determination theory proposed. Like we need to feel autonomized,
Yes.
competent, and also related. We still have this sense of belongingness and relatedness.
Absolutely.
And especially in yeah. Well, I would like to talk about the changes of coaching research. So we actually received quite a lot of requests from teachers and parents of how to facilitate online teaching and learning during the pandemic and how to balance work and life, because the students and children are taking online courses at home. It feels like a universal headache.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So we have tried to change the form of coaching and increasingly conduct online coaching and research. So some of the research has shown that many benefits of online coaching, such as greater flexibility in time and space, and giving our clients sufficient privacy, a lower personal cost, and so on. But there are a lot of challenges, as you have mentioned. We need to face this change. And also I found it's quite difficult to establish a standardized and stable online coaching platform, and how to combine coaching with the frontier technologies. We rely on technologies and the Wi-Fi a lot. Yeah. So if Maslow is still alive, he will agree that Wi-Fi is under the basic fundamental human needs.
Yeah. So I suspect you're correct about that, most definitely.
Right. Yeah, and from a practical point of view, it is from my own experience, is that in-person coaching can allow certain noises from the immediate surroundings, but strangely, we are more sensitive to and are more easily distracted by the noises and interruptions when we conduct online coaching. I don't know, how do you feel about that? What do you feel about?
Yeah. So that's really an interesting, it's an interesting concept, Qing, and I hadn't really thought about it until you mentioned it. But I think you're absolutely correct. I also think that we're present in a very different way virtually than we are when we're in person. I remember people in the beginning talking about Zoom fatigue, right? And being very, so being very present. Because as you said, now the dogs are barking. Who was that? Erica saying the chickens are clucking, all these different things are happening to us. And so we're in a completely different environment. And yet we're trying to connect with somebody else who's in a completely different environment. And so you have these two things that could be, kind of fighting each other in a way. So I think it's a very powerful observation to be mindful of the fact that being present is going to be different, and how we are distracted and or how we get engaged with each other is also going to be very different.
Yes.
What's your reaction to that?
Yeah. I totally agree with you that we change the way to react with people. And I also found that because during the lockdown, people may feel caged, as many clients claim that they feel like in the prison. So this emotional distress and psychological problems will get in, and sometimes the coach confuses the boundary between coaching and counseling. Have you ever experienced that? Because I have many cases like this.
Yeah.
And I have to refer them to these counseling sessions.
Yeah, so it's very interesting too. You have so many excellent questions. So, I would think that I guess my reaction to that is that I found that some of the initial time during the meeting, like as everybody's coming together, that we found new meaning in the need to tend to each other during that time. In some of the meetings or the groups that I was involved with, we actually would take turns for the very first part of the meeting, sharing a piece of art that we loved, or sharing a piece of music that we loved. But
that's amazing.
Yeah. And it was
Yeah.
really powerful because it enabled everybody to share a little bit of themselves, to get to know each other a little bit better, a little bit differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you no longer do we have the meeting before the meeting, or the session before the session, or the session after the session, right? Because there's not that personal kind of interaction ahead. And so I think learning, again, it's sort of like adapting to what I think is now going to be the new normal for us, right? Like how do we recapture the personal touch? Even if we can't be together in person.
Indeed. So what's the new normal for you personally?
Yeah.
Well, time flies. It's almost the end of our conversation.
Oh my gosh, it does fly.
Oh, yes.
We'll have to carry this on outside, won't we? New normal for me, you know, people keep saying, well, when are we going to go back to normal? I think we're there. I think this is the new normal. It's an incredible mixture of in-person, online, even on the fly, I call it. You know, you've got your phone, you're somebody, you know, you need to join something while I'm on a walk in the woods with the dogs, or I'm in the car. You know, we're doing things in so many different places now through so many different modes. Everything is much more fluid. Even the space between personal and professional is so much more fluid, I think, these days. So that's how I think about the new normal, is just needing to be flexible, needing to be adaptable, and really needing to be comfortable with ambiguity. The uncertain, the unknown, because who knows what's going to happen tomorrow anymore, right? And I guess the last thing I'll say on that, and then I want to hear from you, is, you know, this kind of talking again about the mindset, is that if I can operate myself from a very kind of open mindset, I can be much more resilient. And I think that'll help me in the days ahead. What about you? Yeah, tell me. Yeah.
Right. Yes. So the new normal for me is working from home. I'm hardly kidding. Well, actually true, right?
Yeah.
So I think the new normal indicate that we need to accept, acknowledge, and appreciate what the reality has brought to us and what we can do to maximize the potentials in this situation. I really like what you're saying about mindset. It's the attitude, the mindset, what you're thinking are driven, what we are behaving, feeling in this particular way. So I think in this situation, it's very important to build these partnership opportunities among the coaching psychology researchers, coaching practitioners, and educators. Like providing coaching for teachers and educators is quite important in their teaching performance, psychological well-being, and work-related well-being, as well as our own well-being. Another thing that I can see this trend of increasing international collaboration during the pandemic and afterwards, strangely. And I didn't collaborate so much like using the Zoom meeting before, but afterwards, as you have already also noticed, we are increasingly using the online platform to have high quality conversations and the meetings. I think it's a good sign for mutual learning in a wider scope, and it has become a new normal for me. So in the past few years, we might be visiting, travel to different countries to attend conferences and seminars. And now we're comfortable with sitting in front of our computers, setting up the webcam and calculating time zone differences and communication ideas. And we're actually talking to each other face to face, like what we're doing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about how, you know, so in this space that's so new and sometimes uncomfortable and sometimes just different, right? So how do you think about the students, the learning process, and the teachers in the midst of all of this new normal? Because I think I heard you say that, you know, you work with K through 12 all the way through, you know, graduate education. That's huge. So what went through my mind is you're dealing with systems within systems, and you're also dealing with this incredible continuum And it sounds like you can learn so much in so many different ways, but just how does the new normal impact all of that for you, Qing?
Yeah, wow, that's a big question. I think we need another session to talk about this and the different kind of project along this different level of education and continuing. And but I'll tell you that through the experience of working with students and teachers in this particular time, I value mindfulness and compassion a lot in my life and career now. So I'm an academic researcher and a single mom, and working between homes and universities and tutoring my daughter from home a lot during the lockdown when she has to take online courses. So during the pandemic, things can go wrong. Things can go completely different way from what you expected. You want to go to school to do research, but the school suddenly locked down. So you lose all your data and the participants. So things can make you feel really frustrated, particularly when you're not prepared. Yeah. And so I learned to face the moment, watch the emotions and thoughts come and go, and take actions as appropriate as possible. So that's what I call practical mindfulness. It happened a lot to my students and clients as well. So the good thing is that we develop a stronger coaching alliance and mutual understanding because we face a similar issue and became compassionate with each other. So I would like to refer to Antonovsky's idea of sense of coherence. The new normal involves a new sense of comprehensibility, manageability, and meaningfulness. This is our life. We make sense of the new normal and find benefit from it. And trying to reconstruct a new self through it.
Yeah, so what you said about compassion and kind of the discussion around it, Qing, really resonates for me a lot. Because I think what I heard you say in what you just talked about is that not only do we need to be compassionate towards other people, but we need to extend ourselves a great deal of self-compassion as well.
Yeah.
And that we've got to understand that I think what I'm taking away from what you said is that if we are not compassionate with ourselves, how can we even be compassionate with other people? So it sounds like that's some really purposeful work that we need to be mindful of as we move forward.
Yeah, yes. And also as a professional coach, we coach other people to be self-aware. And the first thing is that we need to be self-aware.
I couldn't have said it better myself. That's so true. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And we have 7 minutes left, maybe?
Yeah, I've sort of lost track of time, to tell you the truth. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you, so let's move. Maybe you can tell me a little bit, like if as we kind of wind this down, can you tell me what you see as being some of the, I guess, the key takeaways? Like if all these wonderful people who have joined us for this conversation, like if you would ask them to kind of reflect on one of a few things, what would those few things be?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is coming from my research work. So I work. So as professional coaches and coach educators, please work with people and for people as individual learners, even in teams, to treat them as individual learners. And second take-home message will be like acknowledging the importance of bridging research and practice in coaching and coaching psychology. So it's from the perspective of a coaching researcher and a coaching psychologist. So we're trying to narrow down the bridge of research and practice.
Right.
And the final message is coming from our experiences of the lockdown, like accept, acknowledge, and appreciate the non-new normal, be compassionate of others and especially yourself.
Yeah. Those are really, really powerful.
So how about you, Michelle?
Yeah, I was just reflecting on your discussion of the bridge. And I think sometimes, we see ourselves as individuals in these sectors or professionals with this particular background or that particular background. And I think what you just said really spoke to the power of the bridging, of the learning about each other more, each other's disciplines, each other's backgrounds. And this probably makes, you're probably not surprised to hear me say this, given the fact that I'm a huge supporter of team science and collaboration. I mean, this is part of what we do. But I think too that you just made it very real for me in the context of this conversation. And I think that's really powerful.
Thank you.
Sure.
So So what are the key messages that you would like the audience know?
Yeah. So I think for me, in a way, I feel like it's being selfish, but just sort of this mutual learning mindset for me has been so pivotal and so transformational in not only who I am as a person, but also who I am as a professional, that it's hard for me not to have that as kind of one of the takeaways. If you don't know anything about mutual learning, it's great to learn something about, because I think it can add a lot of richness in many different dimensions. I think the other thing that I would say is, I guess, new normal, right? The future, it's here. I don't know how, it's hard for me to see how moving forward, anything's going to go back to quote unquote the way it was. And I think trying to be agile in this space, flexible in this space, flexible with each other, understanding of each other's challenges and opportunities, right? I mean, so many people were so challenged during the pandemic, and we were so accommodating, right? I mean, we understood that it was a challenge for people. So maybe we can continue our lives, continuing to be very mindful of the challenges that people are facing, which I think aligns with your notion of compassion, right? And I think if I were to say one more thing, the better you know yourself, the more you can be of service to others.
Yeah. Yes, as we have discussed, there's self-awareness.
Yes, right. And I see Erica's back.
With questions.
Welcome, Erica.
With questions. And yes, it's so easy to lose track of time when the conversation is so enriching. I've been getting private messages. There's messages in the chat just about how absolutely relevant and thought-provoking this conversation and dialogue is. It's been really interesting. I almost lost track of time, and I'm the one who's not allowed to do that. So with that said, there were 2 questions in the chat that were raised, one of which I believe you've already started to answer because it was posed, Qing, prior to you saying something. So I'm going to raise both of these in our last few minutes together. The first one was a clarification, which was, how are you defining mutual learning? So I'll give you a minute to think about that. The second question that was raised was, what are some ways to keep that increased sensitivity that was mentioned, that increased sensitivity that we all gained during the last few years? And how do we keep that going without becoming invasive? And Qing, this is where I believe you also began to answer that by talking about compassion in one of ways to do that. And so my question for each of you would be, in addition to compassion, what else? What's one other strategy that you may be able to offer in terms of that? So let's first go back to the process question, which is, how are you defining mutual learning in a couple of sentences? And then we'll jump into the, how do we be compassionate, et cetera, without disrupting and being invasive. Mutual learning.
Yeah. So I think I'm using it probably in 2 different ways. So one has to do with the practice of mutual learning, which actually comes from the work of Chris Argyris, if you're familiar with his Model 1 and Model 2. So that's where it has its origin, and it's been built up and promoted by Roger Schwartz and Associates. And I just popped an article into the chat box that can flesh that out more fully as to when I say mutual learning, this is the practice, this is what I've been training in. The other dimension, which I think is very much aligned in how we're talking about it in kind of preparation for this session, is that we we will work better together in all dimensions if we continually are open to learning from each other. Let me pass it off to you, Qing, to see how you would change that or shift that or rephrase that.
No, I think your answer is excellent because I haven't got so much a theoretical base of mutual learning. I was just just trying to define mutual learning from my own perspective. It actually involves learning, and on top of that, it's learning how to learn, how to become a learner, to be humble and grateful for what other people can teach you by active listening and understanding. So that's a nature of new mutual learning for me. It's not about particular learning strategy or learning skills. It's more like learning dispositions or learning attitude. Like you just said, it's be open, being receptive, and be healthily skeptical, and be collaborate, be listening. So these sort of things for me is like mutual learning. But I don't have a like fine definition of mutual learning though.
Yeah, I think, just to extend on that just a teeny bit, I think it's everything Qing said, and it's being open to others instead of shutting them down, right? I think one way I like to think about it is, and I'll just tell a personal story. I was in a meeting once where I shared an idea, and one of the most senior people in the room burst out at laughter at what I said. That made me feel absolutely horrible. I never wanted to speak up in that meeting again. I mean, senior leader, right, of an organization. So to me, mutual learning is accepting everything that people say. You might not agree with the idea, but maybe instead of laughing, you could say, wow, that caught me by surprise. I wasn't expecting you to say that. Could you tell me more? Something about like being curious instead of assuming something without really knowing it, or even without even asking the question. And so that's how I would build ever so slightly on what Qing said.
Indeed. Yeah, indeed.
So any final pieces here? We had another question here too that came in from Charlene, and we all know this is not a yes or no question. Nothing here is ever a yes or no. We're coaches. So I'm going to ask like a yes or no question, but hear it the way it is. We all know, do we leave the old normal behind because we're now in the new normal? Does that mean we have to leave something behind when we launch into something different? And then we've got our last 2 minutes together. So in our last 2 minutes, think about your yes or your no with maybe one sentence to explain why that's a yes or a no for you. So your final thoughts, do we leave the old normal behind in order to go to the new? Yes, no, why? Give us your final thought. Qing, I see you right. You started to talk. I'm going to go right to you first, and then we'll wrap up with Michelle.
Yeah. I'm just amazed by Erica's framing of questions. They give us a structure of answering question. Well, I would give a quick answer like, no, we don't have to leave everything in order to move on and to accept the new normal. Actually, we use quite a lot of our strengths and resources already to build the new normal for each of us. So the strengths and resources I mentioned is our mutual learning attitude, our connectedness, our love of learning, our curiosity, our compassion, our growth mindset, as Michelle has mentioned a lot. And so all these are this kind of gift that I already have. So we take them as our energy and strengths, and then we move on to build a new normal for us. So that's my answer.
Michelle, how about for you?
I would say yes and no. Sorry.
Well, there's never a yes. Look, go ahead. You got the right audience for that answer. Keep going.
That's right. There you go.
I love that answer.
It's my answer too. Keep going.
Because I think the way that I think about it is that life is a process of letting go to let something new in, right? And so I think about it that way, is I'm going to probably, and I already have let go of a few things so that I can make more space in my life for new things.
Yeah.
Does that mean I let go of everything? No, still lugging a few things along with me, but I'd like to think that I lighten my suitcase every once in a while so that I could put something new in. So
Well, thank you for that. We want to thank both of you for taking the time to join us today from your mornings,
Oh,
from your evenings, to be here today to share this
pleasure.
really gorgeous conversation today. Thank you.